turn now to a continuation of a talk which I started on last Thursday, which is to do with living with intention, which is a sort of up-to-date terminology for what is known in the 38 blessings as non-recklessness in the Dharma, which generally doesn't mean a great deal to the uninitiated. But what I explained last time is that for many things to do with living intentionally or living with a non-recklessness, especially in relation to spiritual teachings, this is something which is very helpful for laying the foundation for the mind as one sets off on the sort of higher echelons of the spiritual quest. So earlier on in the 38 blessings, it mostly dealt with aspects of lifestyle, getting things right to minimize the number of worries you might have in your life. But having got all those things in place, then you can start to turn specifically to cultivating the qualities in your mind or in your character that would lead you eventually towards enlightenment. This is number 21 of the 38, so we're sort of getting there. Oh, I got an echo. And last time I really left you with the idea that very central to Buddhist teachings as a whole, there is this sense of everything in Buddhist practice hinging around this idea of reaching towards a place of enlightenment. Some people might call it nirvana, or some people might call it a freedom from impurities in the mind. But another way of putting that is that it is a freedom from complacency as to the value of the spiritual path. So non-recklessness as it concerns the spiritual path. And another name by which you can call that same quality, especially in the Buddhist context, is mindfulness. So really, if mindfulness is understood in the Buddhist context rather than in a more pop psychology context, it actually equates itself with non-recklessness as regards your approach to the spiritual path or spiritual cultivation as a whole. So today I will give a little bit of a contrast between what mindfulness means in the Buddhist context as opposed to what mindfulness has come to mean in the more popular connotations. And mindfulness, I'm sure, is something that you've heard a lot about already. It may be even one of the reasons that you decided to get involved with meditation in the first place, because as far as we can understand it, it's a sort of buzzword for all the benefits of meditation. And mindfulness sort of complements the meditation practice, because meditation is what you'd be doing with your eyes closed on your meditation mat, whereas mindfulness would be what you're doing to keep that practice going as you open your eyes again and go about your daily life in a sort of intentional and mindful way. So the two things hand in hand ought to have everything covered from the point of view of quality of mind, both inside and outside, as it's become known as McMindfulness, which tends to perhaps overlook some of the more important features that mindfulness was originally intended to convey. And you might say it's a part of the downside of what sociologists call Western cultural appropriation of the idea of mindfulness. So, what do Buddhists actually say about mindfulness? Sort of fun picture. Buddhists, when they think about mindfulness, especially going back to the roots of the word, regard mindfulness to be a sort of recollection or a remembering or a discernment of the difference between things that are good and bad, beneficial or harmful. And the idea of it is to keep you motivated to think, speak, and act in a wholesome way, and not forgetting yourself, and not being distracted by your senses, and always with wise reflection. So this is the original definition of mindfulness. However, since it's turned up in the West, then some Western meditation teachers, we haven't read so much of the original scriptures, sometimes characterize mindfulness as being the quality of bare or undiscerning attention, like going with the flow. And what you often find with so-called Western mindfulness practitioners is that they go around at half speed doing things to make it mindful. Or they might just sit and do nothing and call it mindfulness, and they can feel sort of no meaning of mindfulness. And really, in the true sense of the word, mindfulness shouldn't be just a passive quality. You need to realize that it also requires some effort to cultivate it. Because some Westerners, for example, believe that mindfulness is something that babies and children are born with, because they can also sit there passively and do nothing. So we have to sort of find our inner child by going back to being like that again in order to discover mindfulness. So I'm not sure why it would take some effort to cultivate that. In a traditional context, although mindfulness can sometimes mean observing without judging something, so that bare awareness or unjudging awareness, it can also sometimes mean understanding the true value of something on a deeper level. And mindfulness is actually quite central to many teachings, including that of non-recklessness. Recklessness to you might mean something like running across a highway without looking for traffic first. But in Buddhism, it can mean a lot more than that. It can mean anything that might jeopardize your spiritual path or cultivation. Nonetheless, a little questionnaire which a few of you have had inflicted on you from time to time, courtesy of myself, is that they have tried to define mindfulness in a quantitative way, almost like a psychometric. And some of the things which they talk about, especially on the Freiburg mindfulness inventory, are things like being open to experience in the present moment, being aware of your body while doing other activities, bringing the wandering mind back to the here and now, appreciating yourself, paying attention to what's behind your actions, not judging your mistakes, feeling connected with the here and now. And there's more. Accepting unpleasant experiences, being friendly to yourself when things go wrong, watching your feelings without getting lost in them, pausing rather than reacting to difficult situations, experiencing moments of inner peace in spite of hectic surroundings, avoiding impatience with yourself and others, and being able to smile when you notice how you sometimes make life difficult, presumably for yourself. So, by contrast, the traditional conception of mindfulness is more about uprooting greed or hatred or delusion from the mind. So that needs some generally active effort to be made, and it has 4 qualities. It's supposed to prevent the mind from wandering, because the mind does like to wander after all, like the so-called monkey mind. And through meditation, little by little, we can start to bring it back when it wanders. Even if you have a monkey mind, then the good news is that even monkeys can be trained. In Thailand, they have a special monkey training school in Got Samui and feelings from hijacking the quality of your mind. So let's say you feel angry. You might feel angry occasionally, but you don't let the anger take over and hijack your mind. So anger arises, but you don't let it sort of move in. And you use the mindfulness to remind yourself that you are not your anger. So that's a sort of awareness of what's going on in your mind. If you've got a lot on your mind, then mindfulness will, in theory, prevent the thoughts from proliferating without end. So you have a choice to stop thinking about subjects which you don't want to think about. Not just let them run on ad infinitum. And also this idea of not forgetting yourself is often about not getting lost in thought. Being aware in the present moment is maybe a more modern way of phrasing that. For example, some people are washing dishes, and while they're washing the dishes, instead of focusing on what they're doing, they are thinking something completely different, like, oh, what am I going to do when I finish washing the dishes? Because this task is boring and meaningless. And without mindfulness, generally you don't actually enjoy washing dishes very much, because your mind is never actually focused and you are washing the dishes. So as a result of that, you may make a bad job of washing the dishes, you may drop things, the dishes may not get actually very clean. But if you focus on what you're doing until you have actually finished it, before turning your focus of change anything in your life. So these are 4 traditional properties of mindfulness. As for the benefits, again, traditionally, these tend to come from, and I'll go in more colloquial language, by being mindful, you can set up a sort of barrier between how you feel physically and how you feel mentally. So if your body is in pain or discomfort, if you have mindfulness, it's like you have a little buffer zone between what your body is feeling and how it makes you feel. So you don't let the physical discomfort seep through into the mind in a way that's going to ruin your day. And as you can imagine, it can take some practice, but some people who practice it to the full have found that even if they are in severe or chronic pain, they can actually use the mindfulness quality to reduce the painkiller dosage which they have to take to control the pain, for example. Secondly, you don't get stuck so much in selfish or blinkered perspectives, but instead you tend to see the bigger picture. And thirdly, you have more penetrative insight into the roots of a problem, so that you're not just dealing with the symptoms of a problem, but you can actually see what has caused the problem. That's the sort of thing we mean by wisdom, coming together with mean by wisdom. Keep on mopping up the water, or do you look for where the pipe is leaking? So the wisdom part would lead you to look for the source of the leak. And finally, it gives a sense of self-purification, so overcoming greed, hatred, delusion in the mind, whatever you think, say, or do, in order that whatever you're doing is somehow helping you to become a better person as a result. Functions, mindfulness, jungle, then you just like, mindful, yay, cobra, be mindful. But the monk said he surprised himself. One day he was feeling very mindful, and he realized the danger of being so close to a cobra. So he ran away. And that is probably closer to the true meaning of mindfulness than saying, oh wow, a cobra, that's never seen one up this close before, Yeah? So a little difference between the the sort of McMindfulness and traditional mindfulness. So you can see danger even in small things or seemingly insignificant things. Secondly, it helps you to see where the line needs to be drawn beyond which risky behaviors or damage may start to occur, which exists in nearly every issue you deal with in life. So, like, for example, you might want your children to be happy, but you don't want them to take pleasure in things that may be dangerous to them. Yeah? So you need to draw a line somewhere. And mindfulness helps you to establish where that line needs to be in the best of worlds. Some people start out doing something which they enjoy at first, but if they have mindfulness and then realize if this is something I have to do every day, then maybe I need to pace myself. Because they see themselves in responsibilities, or your responsibilities change, then an awareness of those responsibilities which you have would be called mindfulness. So if your status changes somehow, let's say you just you're newly married or something, then your whole sense of responsibilities and duties would change, I would expect, as a result. And therefore, your awareness of that would also be called mindfulness as well. So that you don't just slip back into your own sort of bachelor pad habits again. And thoroughness, being thorough in everything which you choose to do. If you've ever been a work supervisor, then you realize that people have different levels of thoroughness in what they do. You can see it especially clearly at the end of a day when people are trying to finish things off quickly before they clock out at the end of the day. And some people will make a rush job and usually not a very well done job. But a person who's thorough, they will time themselves to make sure that they finish and make a good job of it by the end of the day, for example. Some metaphors for mindfulness traditionally. Sometimes it's called a supporting pillar, sometimes it's called a big tent pole around which all the other Buddhist teachings were arranged this time last week. From the heart of Buddhism, do good, avoid evil, purify the mind. Remember the one? Starting at 3, going down to Eightfold Path, going further to all the 84,000 parts of the Buddhist scriptures, all arranged around this mainstay of mindfulness or non-recklessness, especially for your sense doors. If you're an adult, sometimes you can see upsetting things and not let it get to you. But if you're a more vulnerable or sensitive person, sometimes you can't manage to do that. And you can't unsee things which have caused you trauma and will continue to cause you trauma every time you're reminded of it. So for those sort of things, it's better that you didn't pick up on those damaging sort of sensory stimuli in the first place. True? So what is the quality that allows you to filter out those potentially damaging things? In Buddhism, the quality it said that you would need would be mindfulness again, acting like a bouncer to keep the potentially damaging things outside before they get in and play havoc with your nervous system. But letting in the good things, of course. A third thing is like an accountant that is responsible for the incomings and outgoings in the mind, especially in terms of the good energy which you can build up for yourself and a lack of any negative emotions, if possible. And in the long-term direction that you intend to go in spiritually, but it may go around in circles. So, waste of energy. And in the same way, mindfulness on a spiritual sort of journey would be something that keeps us going forwards and doesn't let us on his last legs. You've seen pictures like this before? So Buddha wasn't lying down to take a nap although he may have laid down in that way also to take a nap, but this time it's his deathbed. They have a statue like this in some places in Thailand as well. And some people think, oh, well, the Buddha's a pretty cool guy, just sort of lies around all day, mindful, yay. But in fact, it's the Buddha at the end of his life. And once he was approaching the time when he would enter nirvana for the final time, or as it's known as parinirvana, so final nirvana, he announced to his community of monks that anyone who had any remaining doubts concerning their practice should quickly come and ask their questions, because he only had 3 months left to go. So when they heard that news, many of the followers and even the monks were so sad, and they were grieving in advance and crying. But there was one ascetic, you see in the white, his name was Subhadda, and he didn't cry, but once he heard that news, he instantly withdrew himself into the forest and meditated. He meditated while walking, standing, sitting, lying down. He meditated while walking, standing. He meditated so that he could train himself in mindfulness the whole time, 24 hours a day. And someone went to the Buddha and snitched on him. And they accused this monk of being disrespectful. As soon as he gets the news the Buddha is going to die, off he goes into the forest and does his own meditation. Doesn't sound very... That might crop up in the course of my practice over this 3 months. So once he heard the real reason, then the Buddha actually praised this monk's answer and said that other monks ought to be following his example, because he has done correctly and he's an example of what is known as non-recklessness. So not just letting the time pass by without full cultivation of the practice. And in fact, not long afterwards, then Subhadda was able to become fully enlightened, an arahant, and just before the Buddha passed away. And in fact, he was the last known monk to become enlightened before the Buddha passed away. So it might seem like a very high level of practice, maybe not something that is immediately relevant to you, but even on something like a meditation retreat, some people on the retreat know for themselves that they're quite close to making a breakthrough of some sort. And if they know that's the case, then what would be non-reckless for them or mindful for them would be not to waste time chattering or joking around with their fellow people on the retreat, but they might want to spend more time by themselves, engaging in more solitude and practice so that they can secure progress in their meditation and only then return to being their normal gregarious self again. So in conclusion, for mindfulness, to cultivate it, you need to make cultivation of wholesome things or chilling out. A true definition would include things like upholding your sense of conscience and integrity, and also care to see the wisdom in whatever we're dealing with, even in mundane aspects of our lives. When we cultivate meditation, we might be quite proud of ourselves, that we get a warm, fuzzy feeling inside, but if we have a sense of mindfulness throughout the day as well, then we can keep that good feeling going throughout the day, not just during the meditation itself. So mindfulness is something that ideally goes hand in hand with meditation, and it prevents us from sort of proverbially sleepwalking through life, but rather living with intention. So I'll leave you with a few little announcements today. First of which is that if you're new to meditation, enjoyed it today, found it was beneficial, then I would encourage you to meditate further on your own time, trying to make meditation part of your daily routine, maybe by sacrificing 20 minutes of your time each day, maybe first thing in the morning, maybe last thing at night, to practice a meditation. Sit down and practice at a time when you are least likely to be interrupted, and you'll find that that 20 minutes will allow you to go further and further each time. You may have good days, you might have bad days, but have good days. If you feel hazy about the meditation technique, you can fall back on a app which you can download for free onto your mobile phone called MindGem, which has more than 100 different meditation audio tracks which you can listen to from various teachers in our tradition. And it has a timer on it as well to help you sit for the length of time you would prefer to. So still have this remnant of the pandemic, which is online meditations every Saturday between 7 and 8 on British time anyway, where you can hear a wisdom talk and meditate along with the monk via those Zoom coordinates. And on the same coordinates, you can also join full moon meditations. Next one coming up will be on Tuesday, the 8th of November, which happens to coincide with the Thai tradition of Loi Krathong, which is the full moon where they float little candle rafts away on the waters, and we have the theme of floating all your worries away on the waters. So we will make full use of our fish pond once again on that Tuesday evening. But that's also online for those who may be interested to join that at the usual time of 7 to 8:30. And coming up this Sunday, we have the Katina ceremony for this temple here in Woking, where you are encouraged to join in person if at all possible. This time is the first time we haven't done it as a hybrid. We hope that people will actually come back again this year at full strength. Last year we had about 200 people join, so this year we hope it will be more than that, with people coming back maybe who we haven't seen since 2019. But joining is one good way to get all the full benefits of the Katina. So do participate at any time of the day. Eats at the temple. And on the whole day Saturday will be last-minute preparations of various sorts. So really you can come along anytime on the Saturday and help out with something. If you're involved in a particular role in the volunteer team, you might have the chance also to rehearse what you'll be doing on the big day from about 3 p.m. onwards, sort of weather permitting. And you can also make donations for Katina as well. This year, the proceeds of the Katina are going towards building 2 small annexes at the front of the building here. One will be for reception and one for a children's playroom. And you can see perhaps the twin obelisks we have here, which are the symbol of the 2 rooms that have been built. They'll be used as part of the ceremony for those who have sponsored part of those buildings as well. So that's why we have Cleopatra's Needle in stereo and behind us here. Something you normally need to go all the way into London to see. Yes. So for today, I think that is everything I have for you. And unless you have any questions, comments, or feedback for me at this point.